Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Joanne Smedley, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Chief Petty Officer Philip Morris. We warmly welcome the family of Pilot Officer George York, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Western Australia, we have Narrogin Senior High School, Narrogin, Kennedy Baptist College, Bull Creek, Kalgoorlie School of the Air, Boulder, and cadets representing Waratah Flotilla, Navy cadets, and Army cadets of the 22nd Battalion. If you are able, please stand and join in the singing of the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Pilot Officer George York. George York was born on the 5th of February 1915 to George and Anne York of the Sydney suburb of Woollahra. George York attended Woollahra Public School and Sydney Boys High School and enjoyed wrestling, swimming, football and tennis. Following his education, York worked as a manager at an importing company and lived in the suburb of Kingsford. In June 1938, he married Margaret, and the couple had one child together, Ronald Bruce York, born in 1941. York enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 10th of October 1942 and undertook some early training at Bradfield Park and Ascot Vale. On the 15th of January 1943, he embarked from Melbourne for Canada, where he would participate in the Empire Air Training Scheme. The Empire Training Scheme was a joint British and Dominion program designed to ensure that enough trained airmen were available to keep up with the demand in Europe. York undertook courses in bombing, gunnery and navigation, and while in North America took the opportunity to visit Niagara Falls, New York and Kentucky. In August 1943, he departed for the United Kingdom, where he served in the Royal Air Force and continued training. He trained at various times in southern England, on the Isle of Man, in Scotland and in Yorkshire. He often wrote to his family at home in Australia, especially about how much he missed his friends and family. York's extensive training and good record saw him promoted first to sergeant, then flight sergeant and later to pilot officer. In 1944, York joined number 102 Ceylon Squadron, RAF, and commenced a conversion course to fly Halifax bombers. On the 11th of June 1944, just days after D-Day, he took part in his first operational bombing over occupied Europe. On the night of the 12th and 13th of August 1944, York served as an air bomber in a major raid on the German city of Russelheim near Frankfurt. Nearly 300 Allied Halifax and Lancaster bombers participated in the attack. 20 would not return home. In the early hours of the 13th of August 1944, York's MZ-647 Halifax came under attack from a German fighter near Rayborn and crashed into a hill near the small town's railway station. All 8 crew members died in the crash. York was 29 years old. Members of the small town of Rayburn buried the remains of the airmen in the local cemetery. After the war, their remains were moved by British authorities to the larger Rayburg War Cemetery in Germany, where over 3,300 Commonwealth servicemen of the Second World War are now commemorated. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, the 8 members of the crew were originally reported as missing, and it was not until after the war that York's family, including his wife and son, received official confirmation of his death. His grave now reads, "Dearly loved and missed by loving wife Margaret and son Bruce." A number of York's members of his squadron later wrote of him, "He was, I think, the best bombardier in the flight, having completed many trips safely and had the complete confidence of the rest of the crew." Everybody who knew him liked him immensely, and he will be sorely missed by the squadron. His name is listed on the honour roll on my left amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in World War II. A photograph of York with other crew members of number 102 Squadron is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. In this photograph, George York is pictured in the back row, first on the left. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Pilot Officer George York, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.